Let's call to order the Planning Commission meeting of Thursday, January 18th, 2024. If we can start with roll call, please.
Chair Dennison.
Here.
Vice Chair Pefsner.
Here.
Commissioner Moran. Here. Commissioner Simcock.
Here.
Commissioner Yu.
Here.
Chair, we have quorum.
Great, thank you. Next up, I would look for a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I move to approve the agenda as submitted.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Next up, our approval of the minutes of November 16th, 2023 Planning Commission.
Motion to approve minutes of November 16th.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions?
Oh, no, I was here. I came late.
Oh, okay, there you go. I missed that in the minutes, I apologize. Motion carries unanimously. We are going, next up is our City Council Liaison Report. I would like to both thank and apologize that she has been appointed to help us for another year.
I am with you for another year. We just thought the consistency might help.
Very well.
And I enjoy your commission, so thank you. Commissioner Dennison and Planning Commission members. We had a couple interesting things come up. We did discuss moving to a 7-person commission for you versus a 5. And what the benefits and pros and cons of what that would be. And we would love your input if you'd like to give more input on what you would prefer, what you think some of your opinions are on that. That'd be very beneficial to us. If you want to give it to staff, that'd be fantastic as well. The other thing is we've got on our agenda the 327 Sierra Woods, the Green and Green home that you recommended. For approval for the Mills Act. And so we do have your minutes, but if you had anything else to share that you would like us to know, please feel free to contact myself or to tell me tonight or come to City Council next Tuesday so that we can, things that might not be on the minutes, if you would like us to ask questions or anything like that. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much for your report. With that, we will now move to community input. At this time, any person may address the Planning Commission concerning an item that is not on the agenda. The Commission welcomes your attendance and participation. When addressing the Commission, please begin by providing your name and address for the record. Please keep comments to no more than 3 minutes to assure an orderly and timely meeting. Hearing nobody wanting to come forth for public comment, I believe that we'll move to our public hearing, but first we'll do a disclosure of site visits and ex parte contacts, if there are any.
I saw it last time. No. Yeah.
Right.
All right, then let's move to a public hearing. Design review permit 22-03. An application to allow the demolition of an existing structure and the construction of a new 2-story single-family residence. Does staff have a presentation for us?
Staff has a presentation for you. Planner Wolf will deliver the presentation.
Thanks.
Thank you, Planning Manager Lynn, and good evening, Chair Dennison and Planning Commissioners. Tonight, the Planning Commission will be reviewing the design review permit for 174 South Lima Street. This is a continuation from the public hearing at September 7th. Just to reiterate, this is a request to fully demolish the existing single-family residence and construct a new single-family residence with a second story. On September 7th, 2023, at the first public hearing, it was continued to address the comments of the Commission. The first is to find out how many other single-family homes within the neighborhood are 2 stories by expanding that neighborhood analysis. The second comment is to modify the conditions of approval. First, to repair the retaining wall along the southern property line, which is now in condition 2.4, and to provide an underground of utilities, which is condition 2.5. There was another comment to provide a land survey, That can be a modification of 2.2 should the commission wish, or it can be a policy direction as we ask for that submittal in a plan check review. To refresh the commission's memory, the project is located at 174 South Lima Street. This is in the southwest quadrant of the city. It is located between Ramona Avenue and Manzanita Avenue. It does have a land use of residential low density with a zoning of single-family residential and a lot size of 11,013 square feet. It is within vicinity of other multifamily property, which transitions as it moves towards Mariposa Avenue. And it is also within vicinity of the Hunting Lodge, which is a historic property located on the corner of Ramona and Lima Street. And again, to refresh the commission's memory on the nature of the project, this is a proposed prairie-style 2-story residence, as shown in the renders here on screen. The project is compliant with all development standards of the Sierra Madre Municipal Code. That includes lot coverage, building height, gross floor area, building setbacks, and parking. And to expand on the neighborhood analysis, here on the map presented on screen, there are 7 properties highlighted in magenta. Those properties represent those that are 2 stories. And then those have been listed out there for you too. By reference, these are noted on map as number 17, 32, 22, 20, 15, 9, and 27.
Planner Wolf, you mentioned the historic hunting lodge.
Mm-hmm.
Is that at the southwest corner of Ramona and Lima?
That is correct.
And it is a 2-story house.
That is correct.
And it is the oldest building in the surrounding area.
I believe so.
Okay, thank you.
The findings that were presented at the last meeting have not fundamentally changed, but they were updated to be more articulate and to clarify on the neighborhood compatibility with reference to the 7 properties that are 2 stories. And the full findings are part of the report for your reference. Tonight, the Planning Commission may adopt Resolution 22-20 as presented. This approves Design Review Permit 2203. They may adopt the Planning Commission resolution with modifications, deny the request, citing the findings that Planning Commission cannot make and the basis for rejecting those findings, or continue the hearing and provide direction to the applicant and staff. Staff is recommending the Planning Commission adopt Resolution 22-20 as presented. That concludes my presentation. I'm open for questions. The applicant and the owner are here tonight, and staff also did receive 1 public comment via email, which has been forwarded to the commission for their review.
Are there any questions for staff? No? And did the applicant want to make a presentation? Obviously not required, it's optional, it's up to you.
Good evening, Chair Dennison and Commissioners. I'm glad that I'm coming back here to present this project to you again. It's been 3 long months. I'm sorry because of my medical problem. That's why I've been asking to delay the project. The Planning Commission meeting. Thank you for Joshua. Who has presented a very detailed report, so I won't waste your time. And for most of the commissioners here and all the audience, I think, we had heard about, many aspects of the project, discussions, pros and cons. This project, okay, when we first started this project, the owner and I myself, okay, went to city, looked for information, zoning code, design guideline, to find out, okay, the approval a body of the project, whether it's a staff level or planning commission level or maybe require a public neighborhood input, so that we feel very comfortable in going forward with the project after we got all the required information from the staff. And we've been working very hard with staff, okay, going back and forth a few times, making changes, okay, which making the project looks better and better, which come to a point that the planning department willing to support this and present this to the planning commission and ask for your review and possibly approval. I think, okay, the neighbors are concerned about a few things, okay, privacy, two-story house. And what happened is this property, okay, is sitting in the mid-block of Limmer, and we found that there are 7 two-story houses in this neighborhood within the 300-foot, we so-called legal neighborhood. And what happened is 4 of those are right on fronting Limmer. So when you drive along Limmer, you can see these 4 two-story houses. So this house addition, two-story house addition to this neighborhood won't be a new two-story, a unusual two-story house, because there has been, okay, quite a number of two-story houses happen in this neighborhood. And on this property, there are many mature trees. And these trees, okay, we are keeping all these mature trees. And what happened when we design, we try to look for, okay, where these trees are and try to use this tree to use as a natural screening for the existing for the new two-story house. Along the south side, there are a long line of cypress. They are 20-some feet tall. And these cypresses, right, okay, facing our second story, the only bedroom facing the south side. And on the other side, okay, the north side, the property is also higher than our property. Okay, this street is sloping from north to south, which is around like 6% slope. So each lot, okay, their elevation difference is like around the average elevation of each lot is like 2 feet difference. So when we designed this house, we did not, okay, use the entire width of the allowable width to design the house. We make the south side a little wider. We shift the house to the north side more, so that we're adding more separation to the south side, because south side is lower than our property. And so for the entire length of the house, which is very compatible to the length of the neighbor's house. So even if you cut down the trees, all you can see directly to your neighbor's house is their roof. And we have so much articulation on the second floor and further setback. Our second story setback is much more than the required setback, which is one way to increase the privacy of the neighbors. And our windows are like kind of minimum, like the bathroom windows, and this bedroom window is just to meet the building code egress. But the owner also willing to, if it's necessary, for the north-facing window and the south-facing window, we're willing to reduce it. The window, the tallest window is the biggest one is 5 by 4. We can rearrange some of the windows so the egress window will be facing either east or west, so that we can reduce the size of the window facing south and north be shorter, okay, to 2 feet tall, and the window starting from 7 feet down. So I myself 5'8", so 5 feet is somewhere around here, okay, to my nose, Okay, it's difficult for someone always stand there to look at your neighbor, unless they're willing to risk their life, climb up to the roof to look at the neighbor. Tonight, we're here, we're willing to accept all the conditions of approval, and we ask you to consider and approve this project. Thank you.
Excuse me.
Are there any questions for,
I have a
actually, if you could stay up here.
There's just one question.
Yes, sir.
So sorry. Did you meet with any of the neighbors about their concerns? You know, because we've had a couple of neighbors from south and north, just in terms of the design and the modifications you.
Right after the meeting, I tried to approach the neighbor across the street, but the lady kindly told me, I don't want to talk to you.
How about?
That was true.
Okay. Right. Well, just, how
All right,
about?
we're gonna, everybody will have a chance to give public comment, and we'll address things then.
I'm concerned more with the north and south. Anybody above you, you know, the north and south property, the Lima?
That's up to the owner.
Oh, I see, you as,
Yeah.
you as the builder and
Yeah.
developer, I see.
Okay.
But there was no, that was the extent of the discussion or attempt to discuss
Mhm.
the two-story aspects of this property, because that's the main objection, obviously. Okay,
I understand. I explained to the owner, and the owner makes a decision.
I see, okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions for the applicant? All right, then I think we will bring it back for public comment. At this time, any person may address the Planning Commission concerning this specific item on the agenda. The Commission welcomes your attendance and participation. When addressing the Commission, please begin by providing your name and address for the record. And actually, I believe we have some speaker cards, so we'll start with those.
Janet Owens, South Lima.
My name is Janet Owens, and my property is 175 South Lima, across the street from the property. And I want to begin by saying I did ask for a meeting with the owner, and I was brushed off by the developer. What he said is not accurate. Building a second story in the new construction will negatively affect the privacy of those living to the north, south, and east of the lot. How can one property owner prevail when virtually all the neighbors are against the plans? Their property values will decrease as well as mine. No one wants to buy a house when there's no privacy in the backyard. The lot is quite large, and a 4,000 square foot one-story home would still leave about 6,000 square feet for a generous yard. I am sure that the developer and the owner feel that a second story will maximize the amount they will be able to get when they sell. I disagree. The house will stick out and not blend in with the neighborhood and will not be as attractive to potential buyers. Unfortunately, the staff report looks like it's already a foregone conclusion that the project will be approved. There are papers already written and places for signatures dated today. Contrary to staff report, this home does not preserve the privacy of neighbors' properties. On your report, it says it will not interfere with the use and enjoyment of the surrounding and adjacent properties. It will. The bulk scale is compatible with the existing neighborhood. It is not. That it is not so ill proportioned so as to detract from the Foothill Village setting. It does. And probably most important, the project does not interfere with views and privacy of neighbors. It does. It also says that the project is a superior project that would enhance the neighborhood and exhibit exceptional design. Did the applicant write this staff report? Not one of the neighbors' concerns are contained in this report. I'm still mystified as to why we as neighbors were not consulted for our input on this project. Most other cities have the developer and owner meet with the neighbors as a courtesy and goodwill on the part of the owner. This doesn't happen with spec houses because the owner doesn't care about anyone but himself and what he's going to get when he sells. Why, if he is really going to reside in this property, would he want to have virtually every neighbor against his home? It may seem minor to the commissioners, but it means a great deal personally and financially to the neighbors to require a one-story home on that lot. I fear that if you approve this, it will just be the beginning, and Sierra Madre will be just another Rosemead, San Gabriel, or Lower Arcadia before you know it. Arcadia Village successfully fought off mansionization by using an architectural review board that does not allow second stories anymore. Even in Upper Hastings Ranch in Pasadena, they no longer approve second-story additions because of view and privacy concerns. Thank you.
Thank you.
Karma Bell, South Lima.
Hi, I'm Karma Bell. I live immediately south of the proposed property at 184 South Lima. When this first came up and I spoke before, I tried to stress very much that this would interfere in the use of my backyard, because the second story of the house to the north that slopes, so they will dominate over me, would interfere with my privacy. I still stand by that. At that time, I also included a picture, very unprofessional, of the height using balloons and a string to show how high that second story would loom over my backyard. I don't know if you still have it, but it is there. I hope you will not approve this as designed. I think the street is very much ranch-style, one-story homes, and I think that's how it should be projected for the future. This proposed design will stand out, like I said before, like a sore thumb. It will just jut out into a very nice, quiet, peaceful neighborhood, even if it is a busy street. But I also wanted to point out that I printed out some of the things that are mentioned in the staff report. The objective L7, development that is compatible in its design and scale with the neighborhood. And this house is not compatible in its design and scale of the neighborhood. Limit the height of new buildings. This is policy L7-3. Limit the height of new buildings to reflect the prevailing height patterns on the street and within the Sierra Madre community. That's incompatible. Number 3 of the design review findings, that the height, bulk, scale, mass, and siting of the proposed project be compatible with the existing neighborhood, landforms, and surroundings. This house does not do that. Number 4, that the proposed project reflects the scale of the neighborhood in which it is proposed and does not visually overpower or dominate the neighborhood, and is not ill-proportioned so as to produce either architectural or design that detracts from Foothill Village setting. Great statement. In the explanation that follows in that paragraph, a staff reporter, whoever wrote this, said, the contemporary prairie house that is proposed is designed in a style unique to it in its immediate surrounding, which is directly contradictory to what it says in the statement of your policy or your desires to how to build. So that doesn't make sense. And number 5, that the project neither unreasonably interferes with public views or the views and privacy of neighbors. It does, as my balloon silly thing shows. So those are the reasons I would ask you to seek from the developer and the owner a project that is designed to fit more within our streets and more in compatibility with the existing scale and look of their project. I'm all for them having a new project. That's fine and dandy. I just think it should fit with the street and not interfere with my privacy. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
My name is Kurt Nylander. I live at 303 Manzanita. My backyard is adjacent to the proposed project's backyard. So the house would look down into my backyard, which I spend a lot, I'm retired now, and I spend a lot of time in my backyard. I printed out this staff report I read today, and to be quite honest with you, I've read dozens of these over my career, and I thought the developer had written it. Some of the comments in here are just not true. First of all, it's, if you want to follow along with me, page 3, it says it's a single-story traditional ranch-style house. I agree with that. There's 42 homes that were identified. I think you need to throw two of the two stories out. One of them is the historicals, built in the 1800s, and another one has just a small structure over the garage. The primary residence does not have any second story to it. So if you take that, 5 of 42, that's 11% of the houses in that area are two-story. The code allows for a 3,500 square foot, the floor space of 3,500 square feet. The proposed project is 3496. He could build a single-story house. I have no problem with a single-story house at 3,500 street. My problem is with the development that is done. This is objective L6. Development is done in harmony with its neighborhood and preserves and protects the privacy of the neighboring properties. That's just this project is not in compliance with that. It invades their privacy as well as my privacy. A single-story house, which is there now, would not do that. Secondly, develop that is compatible in design and scale with the neighborhood. It's not that. It sticks out. It's a I forget the style, a contemporary prairie style. That is not compatible with the neighborhood. I've lived there for 30 years. I walk the neighborhood every day with my dog. There's nothing like that in this neighborhood. The policy L 7.3, limit the height of new buildings to reflect the prevailing height patterns of the street. Okay, that is 11% is not prevailing. A single story is prevailing. The project will not unreasonably interfere with the enjoyment of the surrounding adjacent properties. Your staff says proposed project will cause no encroachment onto adjacent private properties. That's just not true. If you've heard from the two ladies and myself, it will encroach upon our enjoyment. That the height of the proposed project is compatible with the existing neighborhood. It's not. As we had just said, 11% is not in compliance with the surrounding neighborhood. I can continue to go on. I love this. Contemporary prairie home is designed in a style unique and immediate surrounding, reflecting the eclectic nature of the city, but is not overpowering in that contemporary style single family home can be individually found in the neighborhoods within the city. The contemporary style, which deviates from its current traditional style, original to the track, lends to the village atmosphere by strengthening the eclectic nature of the differing styles. That's just not true. The neighbors don't want it. I think he can build a ranch style or similar to that single-story house on that, have plenty of room, have plenty of backyard, and be compatible with the neighbors in that area. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other public comment? We're not going to have a dialogue between the commentary that was made, so unless you have something new to share with us, then I don't think that...
There's one thing that I did not mention, okay.
You'll have to come to the microphone so that we can hear you. But it can't be a rebuttal.
Oh, no,
against anything that was said.
I'm just, okay, I'm missing a point, but then since they brought it up, okay, I want to clarify the situation. Yes, okay, a single-story house can be like that much of size. One of the reasons that we have a two-story house here is this lot, if you take a look at the preliminary grading plan or the topo map, you can see there's a split level in the middle. Okay, so if a single-story house, build a single-story house, one thing, it will require additional grading to put more dirt in the back, elevating the back elevation even more. I understand, okay, the privacy is very, very important, but...
Right, we're not going to rebut
okay.
public comment, so...
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, then I will bring it back to the commission for deliberation. Who would like to start?
Well, I'll start. I have just two simple comments. I think I agree with the neighbor's assessment. This isn't that original of a project that it deserves, approval as is. I think they certainly could make it a one-story. I realize some of the grading costs extra money, but I've been to the houses, and even though the one house that has all those cypress is kind of hidden in the back, if you look at the neighborhood, it's more, I think, as they characterize it, this sort of low ranch style thing, and this other house is not that original. I think they also don't meet the criteria of number 5 as well. The height just doesn't make any sense, even though they've gone to great pains to minimize it and meet all the setbacks. But I would like them to consider doing a one-story, because I think it fits better with the neighborhood. So I could not support it on L3 and 5, L7.3 and 5.
I'll go. The first time it came around, when it was presented, it met all of the requirements that we threw in front of them. I think that for us to dictate what kind of house they should have seems a little strange to me. And so I think if they meet all the requirements that we've set before them and all the hoops that we made them go through, and they've actually are not building fully to what they could on this thing, and they've taken the time to take extra setbacks on the sides that we have, that they wanted to be, further away from, to be considerate of the neighbors. They've, in the upper floors, they've even set it back even further. The fact that they're even talking about reducing their windows at the detriment of their own house to say that, we're complying with what we need to. I'm here to support it again, so I'm good with what they did.
Yeah, I think my question last time was I was concerned about the size of the neighborhood. What was the definition of neighborhood? They've answered that to me. That we're going to consider it. I'm going to consider it the 300 foot. There are the 7 houses. I'm not throwing them out because of different reasons. I think one of the ones you're throwing out is one of the worst looking ones. So I'm not throwing that out. It's 17% of the neighborhood. That seems pretty much in line with a lot of areas in the city to me. Again, the upper windows, especially on the south side, they said they're even smaller than they are. I think, with the extra setbacks and everything, and they've given, a couple concessions other than that, including a new south wall. I'm in favor of it.
I'm in favor of the project as well. I think we've had a lot of back and forth. I appreciate the previous hearing that we had, hearing from all the neighbors and hearing from them currently as well. I think that's a very important part of the process. It has been an iterative process. I'm sure the developer would have designed a different house without all of these iterations. I live in a 2-story home myself, and I have a neighbor who's doing roofing right now. So right now, the roofers can see in my bedroom, which puts me off in the morning, where I'm like, oh, goodness, I guess I need to definitely make sure my robe's on when I'm feeding my baby and stuff like that. Even with that disturbance, our house has thoughtfully designed windows. So unless you have roofers on the roof, if you thoughtfully design the windows, you can have quite a bit of privacy. And I'm sure there will be different considerations here. We have, window size and trees and other modifications, slight modifications in behavior. We live in a community, so we all have neighbors, and we all modify our behavior a little bit because of our neighbors. And when you have a new neighbor who's doing some construction or a different type of house, our behaviors will be modified a little bit. That is inescapable in a community. And there are options to live out in the desert for us without community, but we choose to live here in a community with our neighbors. And sometimes we have these difficult decisions. Ultimately, having new neighbors and bringing new people into the community involves building and not indefinitely delaying building. In terms of the arguments of reducing the home value of a house, I can say, as someone who recently bought and seen people desperate to move into this community or others, people are just desperate for housing, period. We don't care if it's a ranch, if it's whatever. My family is growing. We have 5 people in our family now. I'm hoping for another baby at some point. Like, there needs to be bigger housing, different types of housing, that sort of stuff, variety. And yes, the majority of the houses in that neighborhood are ranches, but this is also a value that we have in our community here in Sierra Madre, is a little bit of eclectic and not cookie cutter. And that's something that we bring to our developers when we're talking about bigger housing projects, that everything can't be the same. There has to be a little sprinkle of the unique. And that's part of Sierra Madre as well. And, you know, the original historical home in the community is 2 stories. And had that person had their say, every home in that community would have been 2 stories maybe, you know, or no one would be able to live around them. So ultimately, I recognize that this is it's stressful to have change, and it's going to be stressful to have a new neighbor, especially one with 2 stories. If you're used to certain routines, maybe slight modifications. I'm happy ultimately with the fact that this complies with code. I'm very happy that we clarified the definition of what a neighborhood is, you know, in terms of the 300 feet, because I think that that had a lot of back and forth. And we have 2-story homes in the definition of what we've defined a neighborhood as. And there are several of them, and this will be one more, slightly upping that percentage. But ultimately, hopefully the next project will be a ranch, and we'll be able to have that mix of percentages maintained. It's not breaking the bank in terms of all the homes changing and the character fundamentally changing. So I'm in support of the project. Thanks.
Thank you. So a few comments, just for the sake of clarity. I don't think we defined the word neighborhood, because the word neighborhood is not defined in our codified system. But what we said is that, as we've done in all our other precedent, the 300-foot radius is the number that we used to do a study.
Okay,
right?
thank you
So,
for that clarification.
Yeah.
We at least defined what we meant by the study, so
Yes.
that people wouldn't
Yeah.
be talking about different things.
And that's the same size study that we have traditionally used for a bunch of.
Who came up with
I'm sorry, we're not going to be taking any more public comment.
Just want clarification. Who came up with the 300 feet radius?
That's something that we can look into and get back to you for.
To fit into supporting it, or is that actually something?
As I mentioned, that is the standard study circumference that we have used as long as I've been on the commission, and I've been doing this since 2017. So this predates the 2017, so we're not going to talk about it anymore.
Standard, or was it put so it would fit into this project?
Since 2017, it's been 300 feet. So that predates this project just a bit. I appreciate if we'll now let the deliberation continue. Thank you. So a couple other things that I wanted to point out. City staff, every report that we receive from you always has the dated document that we have to approve. That is, city attorney, please correct me if I'm wrong, but we have to have those included so that we can actually approve those.
Right, so when city staff feels comfortable bringing a project before the planning commission, they bring that project forward with a staff report favoring approval, as well as the resolution required to actually do the formal approval. Staff would never bring a project before the planning commission if staff didn't recommend approval itself.
Unless the developer said, put it forth anyway.
Correct.
Yeah. So then, I think what I'm hearing you say is, every time that we have not approved it on the first time, they came to us saying, city staff recommends it. So this is not out of the order. What the point that I'm making is that this is the way that every single report comes to us. This is not a novel concept unique to this project.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. As far as specifically with the House, 17% seems to be a fair number of representation across this selected area. I think that it's particularly poignant that the one of the oldest houses in the study area is actually a two-story house. I think that that clearly indicates that this neighborhood has had a history of two-story houses in it. While the style is unique, one of the things that makes Sierra Madre the village that it is having unique styles all through the different neighborhoods. By code, we allow two-story houses to be built. So if there is a feeling that two-story houses should not be allowed in this neighborhood, the right place to discuss that is in the public comment section at City Council, where they can make those recommendations based on what they hear from the community. We are reacting to the code as it's presented to us today. This house is compliant in every codified requirement that is put before us. Every time we talk about second-story houses, we ask for the mass and the bulking of the house to be stepped back and pushed away from the street. And the developer has done that. The developer has gone to the effort of making a split level to minimize the height. They have gone under the maximum height that's allowable, which is not something we always see. So I think that the developer has made some good efforts here, or the applicant rather, to build a house that is compliant with code. They've tried to preserve some of the older trees that are on this property, and so I am able to make these findings. So those are my 2 cents. If anybody would like to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve design review permit 22-03 and pursuant to a planning commission resolution 2220 as is.
Actually, I'm
Okay.
sorry, we need a second first.
Second that motion.
Okay, would you accept a friendly amendment to have staff work with the applicant to minimize those window sizes?
Yes.
I would like that included in the criteria for passing.
Yes.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
All right, motion carries 4-1.
Ruin the city.
What did you say?
Next up, we have a discussion, the 2023-2024 California Legislative Session updates. Mr. City Attorney.
Thank you, Chair. Before I proceed, I just wanted to ask you, Chair, how you'd like to proceed.
I'm sorry, we are still meeting here. Thank you. Yeah, Planner Wolf, if you wouldn't mind closing the door for us.
I was going to ask you, Chair, would you like me to, this might be long, so would you like us to cap it at 20 minutes, or would you like us to go through this entire presentation? This is going to be part one.
Can you define long?
It depends on I could get through all this in 20 minutes, but if there are questions and discussions, I don't know how long it'll go.
You'd be like a podcast and put it in double time?
Best I can.
We need to cover it all.
Yeah, we gotta do it
We need to cover it all at some point, and I suspect we may have some busier meetings coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah, the next meeting will be the Meadows.
Why don't we proceed?
All right.
Tear the Band-Aid off right now.
Okay, so this is part one of the 2023 year-end legislative report. This is going to cover housing and land use. I thought to myself, perhaps I can make this a simple update, but then thinking it through, because there are so many new commissioners, I thought it probably would benefit this group if we could go into further depth. And I'm not going to do this with the city council, I'm only going to do it with this body, because this body needs to know housing law it's more important that this body knows housing law than the city council, because this body sees a lot of these projects and the city council doesn't. So I'm gonna go into depth on, density bonus law, other types of laws, and we're not gonna cover everything today, just a few that I wanna highlight today, and we'll keep some for the next time. Next slide.
Oh, you have the clicker.
Oh, sorry. So this year, the legislature introduced 2,066 bills and approved 1,046. The governor vetoed 156 of those. So we have 890 bills that became law.
What, is that a record?
It's I don't know that it's a record, but those are all bills that the California League of Cities has filtered through and passed on to us, and now we're sifting through the hundreds of bills that we've received from them, our offices. So big picture, you may have heard this if you've been on the commission before, but just big picture, I want you to kind of think about what the situation the state is in. As you know, we are in a housing supply crisis, and the state has limited options. So if you look at that left-hand column there, it says supply of housing and demand for housing. So the state's options among them are command and control regulations. State goes in and does it itself. With respect to increasing supply, the state could, you might think, build affordable housing. It's not that simple. The state actually can't build affordable housing because there's a constitutional amendment that requires the state to get the local electorate to sign off on any kind of affordable development before it can actually build. So building affordable housing is something the federal government can do, not really something that's feasible for the state. Going one box down there, again, command and control. What can the state do to decrease demand? The option would be prohibiting domestic or international immigration, but again, not something the state can do because that's a federal government prerogative. So shifting over then to the next column, market-based regulations. In order to increase supply, a market-based regulation is to reduce the cost to build housing by removing market constraints. Another market-based solution to reducing demand is just allowing prices to increase, which is what's happening presently. Some alternatives include controlling the price of housing inputs, land, labor, or capital, or establishing purchase/rental price controls, which the state has also done with respect to rent increases. And another option is increasing purchasing power through lowering taxes or increasing subsidies. So there's a lot of policy options available, and the state is undertaking some of them. But
local municipalities, I mean, Santa Monica had rent control, and it was local, but it wasn't statewide, so, I mean.
So let me draw a distinction here. There's a difference between rent control, and I'm forgetting the term now, but rent control is setting the rent. What the state law has done is actually limiting how much rent can be increased versus actually setting what the rent is going to be. And so cities don't have the authority to do rent control unless you did rent control, I think, back before Costa-Hawkins was adopted. So I think if you're doing it in the early 90s, you can do it today. And Santa Monica was one of those cities. Los Angeles was one of those cities. But Sierra Madre is not. So the state now is really focusing on this one here, reducing the cost to build housing by removing market constraints. The market constraint the state is focusing on are cities' zoning codes. So as you know, cities in their zoning codes have zones, or residential, commercial, industrial. Those zones often identify uses, and with respect to those specific uses, we have development standards. So in this zone, you can do X, and X has to meet this height, this setback, this lot coverage, etc. And we also have regulatory procedures that govern how these things are processed. Whether they go to the planning commission, whether they go to city council, if there are appeals, who considers them, et cetera. So, with that in mind, I'm gonna focus on 3 big bills today. The state has done all these different things to try and increase housing production in California. I'm gonna focus on 3: State Density Bonus Law, Housing Accountability Act, and ADUs today. Okay, so density bonus law. We have in the city a density bonus ordinance. The benefits of a density bonus are that you get more units per acre, right? So more density. If you qualify for a density bonus, you get these things called incentives or concessions, which I'll talk about. You get waivers or reductions of certain development standards, and you get preferential parking standards. So I'm going to talk about how this actually works now. Before I do, let me just, this is a slide that came from HCD. HCD stands for Department of Housing and Community Development. So this is their slide that they developed to explain what density bonus law is. So if the 2 commissioners to my right wouldn't mind doing the dialogue here. Commissioner Simcock, if you could begin.
Wouldn't it be cool if there was a way to build brand new deed restricted affordable housing without any government subsidy?
Well done.
Of course, but that's impossible.
Imagine if a developer could make a trade with the city. The developer chooses to add affordable units to their project and is rewarded by being allowed to build more market rate units than they would otherwise be allowed. The 2 sides balance out and the development stays economically feasible.
That's wild, but what about all the development standards? More units is equivalent to bigger buildings. How would the bigger building meet development standards like building heights and setbacks?
The developer would get to bend and break some of the development standards to make the project possible.
Smart, the community's gonna love this.
Little ad lib.
I especially like that last part.
You're gonna break laws.
So I just think this slide is helpful because it gives you some insight into how the state regulatory body that's in charge of implementing these laws is thinking about them. So who's eligible for a density bonus? A developer requesting a density bonus, right? So you have to request it, first of all. You don't just get it. Developer has to request it in their application. It applies to a housing development consisting of at least 5 or more residential units. So the last project we saw obviously wouldn't qualify. It needs to be in a mixed use or residential zone. So housing needs to be allowed in that zone. The developer needs to agree to record a 55-year affordability covenant for 55 years for, I think it's for sale, and 45 years for rent. To construct a threshold number of affordable senior or qualifying housing, or they can donate land for affordable housing, which we never see, so discount that.
Sorry, can I ask a question
Yeah.
before we go on? And I'm probably oversimplifying this, but we allow residential in the commercial zone.
We do not allow residential in the commercial zone. Do we? You do.
Yeah, mixed use, right?
Mixed use, yeah. Well, wouldn't that be mixed use zone?
No, the mixed-use zone is in that Montecito corridor.
Yeah.
only.
Oh,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Mendocino has some.
Then yes.
So are we allowed to put residential in the commercial zone? I thought we were. I thought we could build second stories
Mhm.
anywhere that's a commercial zone, right?
Yeah. Remember we talked about the storefront, the
Yep.
first 50
Right.
feet, and
Right.
then beyond that, it can
Or
be
above.
residential and above.
Yeah. So.
Right. So for purposes of the density bonus law, that's a mixed use zone.
And the only zone that isn't similar to that is the one that is actually a mixed use by code, which is the Montecito area. So basically, exclusive of institutional uses in town, you can build residentials everywhere.
That's correct.
So to qualify for a density bonus, you have to meet these minimum affordability thresholds. They're lower for very low, the lower income people you serve, the lower that threshold is, right? So if you provide at least 5% of the units for rental or for sale to very low income households, you're gonna get a density bonus. And we'll talk about what that range is. 10% of all units, if they're for low income, you get density bonus. 10% for moderate income households, for sale only though, not for rent. You also get it for market rate seniors, transitional foster youth, disabled veterans, homeless persons, and you get 20% for student housing.
Could I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
I don't know if you know the answer to this, but at least 10% of units are for sale to moderate income housing households. How does that work when that household goes to resell their house? Does it then go back to market rate, or is there a cap when they go to resell? How does that work?
You've anticipated one of my next slides.
Okay, all right.
I do have a question.
45 years.
Yeah.
So we can do this on 5 or more units.
Yes.
So which way does that round for 5%? If we have 5 units and one of them are that way?
Correct.
So, okay.
You round up.
So the one would cover all of those?
Correct.
One of 5, okay.
You would round up.
Well, it sounds like any of these would give you the density bonus.
On a
Like
5.
if you have any, if you meet any of these criteria, then you qualify.
Correct. Any of these give you a density bonus, but density bonus comes in ranges, and you'll
Okay,
see that next. All right, so before I get to the ranges, household. So the state has a regulation that they publish every year, and they update to let us know what very low, extremely low, low, and moderate income mean, and it's all based on county. The county median income, and for LA County, the median income is $98,200. So you are low income if your family income for a family of 4 is $100,900 per year in LA County. You are moderate income in LA County if for a family of 4, your household makes $117,850. We all 850
850.
yeah, 117,850.
Round these numbers.
The state also has a statutory calculation for what constitutes affordable rent. So for example, if you are a moderate income household and you someone is going to build a unit that's, moderate income rental, that unit has to be no more than, that unit can't charge any more than $2,700 plus an allowance for utilities. I don't know what the allowance for utilities is, but I doubt it'll get you past 3,000.
Would you refresh my memory about how it is that this income validation happens, and more importantly, ongoing compliance with it?
HCD publishes these numbers every single year. So these numbers are, we have new numbers every single year because it changes every year. And the way we comply is we have the property owner who records a covenant report to us. If I'm not mistaken, they submit annual reports.
We just started it. We have the covenant recorded. Yeah, and then annual report will need to be submitted.
So every time there's an affordable unit, there's a deed restriction that goes on. So there's like a special form. It's like an agreement. They sign off on it. They record it on title. We get proof that it's been recorded on title, and there's often a reporting requirement associated with that. So like the landlords have a reporting requirement, not like a property owner. So the landlord would verify saying, I'm renting it at this rate, and then they would tell us who they're renting it to. And they'd say that this person's income, because it's the landlord that checks, this person has a household income of low.
So the landlord, on an annual basis, has to validate the income of their tenant.
I believe that's correct. I want to confirm. Is that generally how, right?
And if somebody is no longer in that threshold, I imagine they're not allowed to evict that person, but What happens to compliance in that case when the tenant is no longer?
No, that's a condition of your tenancy. You have to be low income, because there's a recorded covenant that runs with the land. If you're no longer low income, you won't qualify for that housing.
And is it the case, as far as I recall, for these affordable units, there's a long waiting list and you have to like apply
Start making more
to
money.
even
There goes your
be
rent, right?
like a renter of these affordable units?
Different cities have different methods. I'm not really sure how Sierra Madre does it. Do we leave it up to the developer to make that determination?
Okay. so leave it up.
Bigger cities like Glendale and Pasadena that have housing authorities, they have people, it's a lottery system with them.
People are desperate.
People apply and
they're
they're
verified when they get on.
right. What we prohibit though, so you know, is like you can't rent it to your family or like your grandma or something like that and call that low income. So it has to be like someone that's not related to you and legitimately qualifies.
Yeah, so I couldn't say my mom's a retiree and she's low income, so therefore
Right.
I'm gonna rent to my mom as a developer and get this bonus kind
Right,
of thing.
right. That's what ADUs are
As a
for.
developer.
Yeah.
It's only an infraction for developers. I mean, if you,
Right, once it's sold though.
I mean, if you have an ADU in your backyard and your grandma's living there, it's
But-
none of their business what she's paying you to live there if you,
Yeah, but
if
this
she's paying it.
affordable stuff usually has a lot of
Yeah,
restrictions.
yeah.
And the
Developers
covenant
get
is
more
recorded
than
with the
5
deed,
years, right?
so it can't change for 45
45 years for
Right.
rental and 55 years for sale.
But if my grandmother wants to rent it and she's very low income, I couldn't rent it to her.
If you're the
I'm
developer,
not a developer, I'm the owner 10 years later.
Oh,
like the building was sold to you,
Yeah, I mean, developer doesn't usually own the building after it's
I'd
built.
have to read the condition we put in there, but it may really, I don't think that the condition says developers, relatives, I think it's the owners.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I mean, 'cause
Like
the
whoever owns the
developer,
building can't find
Yeah.
like their favorite low income
Okay.
person and put it in
Okay.
there and
And-
say, I'm done.
And we have a standard covenant we use, so we could share that with the commission if you're interested.
okay.
Okay, so here are the density bonus numbers. So you can see, and this isn't even all of them, this isn't the full range, but just to give you a sense of what this range is. So 5%, right, like I said, triggers density bonus at 20%. Same thing here with low income, 10%, you get this 20% density bonus. And it really goes up to 50%, so the range is 20 to 50. This is exceptional. This very low income and low income, if you provide 80 to 100% of your development at very low or low income, you're getting an 80% density bonus. But those are very rare projects. We see them from time to time, but those are nonprofit developers that get a ton of state subsidizing to develop stuff like that. That's never a market rate. That's never a for-profit developer building stuff like that.
Who's subsidizing it, the state?
The state, yeah, there's a tax credit program through the state and federal government that allows for very affordable types of development like this.
Or the developer, tax credit for the developer?
Yeah, nonprofit developers, not just
Right, right.
not for-profit developers. Yeah.
Is that how they're doing the micro units and stuff? Is that to get this?
No, if you're talking about the homeless housing, is that what you're talking about? The micro units for homeless housing?
Not for specific homeless, just low income.
I'm not
Pasadena
sure
just
which
built
project you're
one,
talking about.
yeah.
Which city built it?
Pasadena just built one.
Oh, I'm not sure.
Okay, just.
Yeah, those things in the park, those are.
But to Commissioner Simcox's comment earlier, if you have 5 units and one of them is for very low, you're above that 15% threshold, so you would get a 50% density bonus.
If you have 5 units and one is for very low, then you would get a 32.5% density bonus.
Wait,
One unit would be 20% of your development.
I'm sorry, you get 50% density bonus, right, correct.
wow.
50% density bonus. So you would get, so if you have 5 units and you always round up,
3.
you would get 8.
So your density bonus is on all units though, right?
Well, it
It's
can't
on
recursively
it's on the
do that.
base unit. It's on the base number of units. So you couldn't do.
Oh, it's on
you're
the
not counting-
number of
Yeah.
units.
You're not counting base plus density bonus allotted to you. It's not on 8. It's on 5. That's how you're calculating it. And you can't combine categories either. So you have to
Oh,
choose.
Right.
So like, let's say you had a 50 unit project. You couldn't get like some very low and try to benefit from both density bonuses. You got to choose one. You can provide very low and low development in the same project, but you just can't benefit from two different density bonuses. Now, this is something that took up an hour and a half of my time today. The first bill we're going to talk about.
Now you're passing it on.
Yeah, the first bill we're going to talk about is what I'm calling the super density bonus, because it sounds more fun than additional density bonus. So let's say applicants max out, because let's just go back real quick. The max out number is, for very low, is 15%, right? You get, because the range is between 20 and 50% for your density bonus. So for very low, you max out by providing 15% affordability. For low, you max out at 24%, and for moderate, you max out at 44%. Now, the state is saying, if you max out, you're meeting that, you're getting the 50% density bonus. The state is saying, we'll give you an additional density bonus if you build more very low income and moderate income units. And it's interesting because they're not saying low income. So it looks like the state is prioritizing, it looks like we're developing low income in California, but we're not hitting the very low income and moderate income numbers. So if you max out and you decide to build more very low and moderate income units, here's what you get. So let's say you're at already very low 15% of your development. If you go more very low at 5%, you get a 50% density bonus plus a 20% density bonus for a total of a 70% density bonus. Let's look at low. So like, let's say,
Is that 20% on the maxed out number or on the original number?
All calculations are based on base density.
Okay.
So we don't factor in density bonus units into these calculations.
Okay.
Looking at low. Let's look at low at 24%, right? So you already maxed out, you're getting a 50%. Plus you build moderate units at 15%. So now that your project's kind of mixed, right? You got a mix of 24% low income, 15% moderate income. You get 100% density bonus for that. You double the size of your project. Density bonus might be the most powerful tool for developers to increase the density of their development, but also we're going to get into now how they can deviate from our development standards. So the first bill talking about today, AB 1287, the super density bonus.
It's confusing.
Yeah, it is.
So
it is confusing.
Just really quick.
Yeah.
So the 50 plus 50 is just 100. It's not like a compounded 50, right?
It's 100, yeah.
Okay.
So doubling the
yeah. It's not 50 plus. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's 100. So if it was 5, we'll go back to the beginning. If it was a 5 unit with 1 designated for very low, we would get 100% bonus
So now you have a 10.
for 1.
All right.
So now we have a 10 unit with 1 very low, or do we have to make the second very low because we got the bonus?
So let's do it then. We have 5 units.
Right.
One of them is for very low.
Right.
So it's 20. So you're saying 20% of the units are very low, right? So that means very low at 15% plus very low at 5% means 50% plus 20. You get 70% density bonus for that. You follow what I'm saying? Because 20%.
Oh, I see.
Would be 15% plus 5% would give you the
So
70%
We
density
would have
bonus.
had to have 2 originally to get higher.
Yeah, with 2 you would hit the 100% mark
Then you could
for a
go.
5-unit development.
So 1, we still get 70%.
1 you would get 70%. Okay, so in addition to density bonuses,
It's crazy.
developer can choose, I want a density bonus, I don't want a density bonus. They can also choose, once they qualify for a density bonus, whether they want these incentives or concessions. An incentive or concession includes a reduction in site development standards or modification of zoning code or architectural design requirements, approval of mixed-use zoning in conjunction with a housing project if inclusion of commercial, office, or industrial uses will reduce the cost of the housing project, and other regulatory incentives or concessions. So this part allows for a little bit of creativity. How many you get? Well, if you provide, it's kind of like the density bonus, right? Depends on how much you provide. The more affordability you provide, the more incentives or concessions you're afforded. Now, here's the next bill, or it might be from the same one, just the second part. AB 1287, right? This is still part of the super density bonus bill. Same law, has a second part to it. It also gives applicants greater incentives and concessions when they max out. So if you look at that very low number here at 16, you already max out at 15%. If you provide more, so in your example, Commissioner Simcock, if the person provides 20% now, as of January 1st, 2024, they would be entitled to 4 incentives or concessions, whereas in December, they were only entitled to 3. So everything in red is new. Same thing with moderate income. If they maxed out at moderate income, now they get 4 incentives and concessions. If you're a fully affordable project, now you're getting 5, whereas before it was 4. And then there's this new requirement for affordable low-income student housing, which we don't really deal with in Sierra Madre. Okay, so density bonus we talked about. Incentives, concessions we talked about. The third benefit of a density bonus is eligibility for waivers and reductions of development standards. If compliance with a development standard would physically preclude construction of a housing development utilizing the density bonus and concession or incentive. So you're using all this stuff, right? Your development just got bigger, and maybe you have an incentive or a concession to add some commercial or something, and now you're in violation of development standards. Well, now because of the way you've developed it, you're allowed to waive or reduce some of these development standards to accommodate this development that you got because of the density bonus and the incentives and concessions. There is no maximum limit on the number of waivers the applicant may request. So they just have to justify it. And the way you justify it is you show that as an applicant, I'm entitled to this density bonus and I'm entitled to this incentive and concession, and here's what I want to build, and I can't build this unless you start reducing or waiving the X, Y, Z development standards.
So would the compliance with the development standard, so we were just talking about downtown, you have to have like commercial in the front 50 feet or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But what if I said I just want to build a 5-unit apartment building where the gas station is? I couldn't build it because I'm out of compliance with the development standard because of the zone. But now if I build into that, I can build it?
No.
You still have to meet the zone?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a threshold question. If the zone won't qualify you for that development, then you won't be entitled to the density bonus to request that incentive or
Okay.
concession.
But an example of incentives, it could be your height restriction, your
Right.
maximum
All development
allowable
standards, FAR,
FAR, all of that stuff.
lot coverage, setbacks,
Right.
But it
open space requirements.
But it wouldn't be something like, I'm planning my development to be all 1 story, so I need a waiver from setbacks.
Well,
Because the option for them would be build 2 stories so that they don't need that waiver.
there was a case exactly on point that talked where the city said, well, developer, I see what you're trying to build, but you can accommodate our development standards if you change your design. And the court weighed in and said, city, you can't force the developer to change their design. If they have a design and they got that design through density bonus and incentives and concessions, then you accommodate that design basically.
So if I was to build a 2-story downtown with a commercial in the front and just say residential in the back, 5 units, and I couldn't fit the more density, can I go up to a 3rd story?
Yeah.
In spite of Measure V.
In spite of Measure V, we're going to get to that too. They
Oh,
clarified
okay,
that.
sorry.
They clarified that this year. I mean, we always knew that was a law, but they clarified it this
But
year.
why even cap it at 3? I mean, you could have a 5-story building with.
Oh, well, yeah, and that's the trickiest
Yeah, you
thing
can
here.
go as high
Yeah,
as
I
you.
mean,
You can go as
some of
high as you
these-
want as long as you,
10 units can be 10 stories about it, yeah.
Yeah, and that's the trickiest thing here, because what hasn't been tested yet in the courts is how far can you take this waiver provision? So far, they've afforded developers a lot of leeway. But I think if someone tried to build a tower in a city, courts might ask why. But I don't know yet. That case hasn't been tested. Commissioner Yu was talking about some of these development standards. You know, here are some of your basic development standards. SB 713 is the next bill, and here's what SB 713 says. It adds this line in red, which addresses the point about Measure V. It says that development standards include those that are enacted by local government's electorate, exercising its local initiative or referendum power, whether that power is derived from the California Constitution, statute, or the charter or ordinances of the local government. It's directly on point. Now, HCD, that regulatory body, years past, had said in a little technical advisory memo that this applies to local initiatives. But HCD is a regulatory body, and that's their interpretation of law. And cities had different interpretations, and they fought over it. And the state legislator came down and said, nope, we agree with HCD. It applies to your initiatives too. So this applies to Measure V. You can get around Measure V through density bonus law. Parking ratios. I won't go too much into this, but just know that there are favorable parking ratios, and that's the fourth big benefit of a density bonus. Favorable parking ratios. When this parking ratio statute was adopted, the legislator estimated that above ground parking per parking space cost the developer $24,000, and underground parking cost the developer $34,000. So you cut down 100 units of parking above ground for the developer. That's $240,000 savings, right?
At least we're not a half mile from a transit stop.
Sorry?
We're not a half mile from a transit stop.
We are not.
right? Okay.
No, a lot of these don't apply.
The only thing that might was, what is it, a paratransit service, but that is only for the senior stuff.
Right,
Oh, okay.
right. Or rental project. Right.
Is that why we kicked the
Well-
bus out? Is that what we did?
Right, because
No,
the
I
bus
think-
is
That was
gone,
their
right?
choice. That was Metro's choice. That wasn't our choice.
That was on there.
Yeah.
I think that micro metro service, those vans that you see
Yeah.
around, like, count as a
They do not
paratransit.
count. We've
Okay,
confirmed this.
alright.
Yeah. Okay, still on density bonus, AB 323. So you were talking about selling some of these units, right? If it's a for sale unit, well, what if you sell it and what happens then? For sale units constructed under the density bonus law or a local inclusionary housing ordinance, which we don't have in this city, but other cities have it, must be offered to income qualifying persons. That obligation is placed now on the developer and on the city. If the unit is not sold within 180 days of the certificate of occupancy being issued, if it's so, meaning it's not sold to an income qualifying individual, the unit may be offered to a qualified nonprofit housing corporation. So you can give it to a nonprofit who is in this business of renting it out to low-income people. If we're in violation, we get a $15,000 fine per unit. The reason this came about is because the city of Encinitas had a developer who came in and took advantage of the density bonus law, built very low-income for-sale housing, and after they built it, they went to the city again. They petitioned the city to get rid of the covenant that limited it to very low-income people, and the city said, "Fine by us." And then they sold it to a developer. They sold that unit that was basically subsidized to a developer, and the state got upset.
15,500 units though, isn't that?
That's not much.
Like, is that like per day?
I mean,
No, that's, well, they reversed the transaction, sorry, I may have left that out.
Yeah, okay.
oh, okay.
Your transaction is unlawful under state law, and you can't contract around state law. So they reverse the transaction, and then they fine you $15,000, and if you do it again, they're gonna fine you
Got
again.
it. It's like when you
Okay.
overdraw your account.
So they-
Right.
The city got fined because they made the deal with the developer to get
Well,
rid of it.
no, the city didn't get fined because this law wasn't in effect when they had that transaction, so the city got away with it.
But if it was in effect, this is the law that cut that off.
Yeah.
This is the wink to, it's the beach, and you guys are gonna pay through the nose and forget the low-income people, so sorry.
Yeah.
So no matter what, you can't do it, but if you try,
Everybody
they're
on
gonna
city
hit you
council.
with a fine.
He's gonna, we'll fix it.
All right.
Okay, so we talked about density bonus law. Now let's talk about, I think, ADUs. Right. So, Commissioner Pevsner and Chair Dennison, you both know a lot about ADUs because we've covered it a lot. But for the new commissioners, just some background because I don't want to assume any knowledge. An ADU is an attached or detached residential dwelling which provides complete independent living facilities for one or more persons. So you must include facilities for living and sleeping, such as a bed, eating and cooking, such as a stove, kitchen sink, counter, stuff like that, and sanitation. These three elements need to be in every single ADU, otherwise it's just a room. It needs to be on the same parcel as the primary unit. So we're not talking about subdividing this lot, right, and creating two separate units. It's
So now
one
we
lot.
can Sell them, right? Separately.
Again, you've anticipated one of
Okay,
my slides.
yeah,
They're
all
coming.
right. Sorry, I read a bunch about this already.
Yeah,
So-
that was coming. Okay, so just some quick examples here. Different types of ADUs, right? That first, the one on the top right there, that's an attached ADU, right? And it's part of the building itself. The second example there, that's also an attached ADU, but it's, in addition to the primary dwelling. It's not like a room of the primary dwelling that's been repurposed as an
Still
ADU.
calling that the junior ADU?
Junior ADU is different. We'll get to it.
Okay.
And a detached ADU is one that's detached from the primary residential dwelling. So junior ADU means a unit that is no more than 500 square feet. So that's really what a junior ADU is. It's about size. So going back to this, all of these, the first two can be junior ADUs. If
It
they're,
has to be attached to it, I think.
it has to be attached.
Yeah.
Correct. You can't have a detached junior ADU. So it has to be attached. It's got to be part of the primary residential dwelling, and it has to be less than 500 square feet or less. And a junior accessory dwelling unit may include separate sanitation facilities or may share sanitation facilities like a Jack and Jill type bathroom with the existing structure.
And it doesn't have to exit, there doesn't have to be an exit out.
I'm gonna turn to staff here.
Thank you.
Do we need a separate exit for a JADU?
I think you do.
I thought that was.
Have it independent.
Yes, you do need separate entrance exit for both a junior and full ADU.
Thank you. Okay, so just some examples of what is and is not possible. You cannot have both ADU and ADU attached to the single family dwelling. Actually, hold on, give me a sec here. This is an older slide. This is possible. You can have, oh no, I've clarified, sorry about that. You can have this, a JADU and an ADU, right?
Both attached.
Both attached. But you can't have a single family home that has two ADUs.
And what about two JADUs?
You can't have two JADUs. You can have one or the other, or both of the two, a combination of both, but you can't have two JADUs, you can't have two ADUs.
Well, but if the second unit is
It should be better worded.
You gotta make it bigger.
501 square feet, and the other one is 499 square feet, one's a JADU, one's an ADU, right?
Yeah, correct,
So, I mean,
correct.
And it sounds like you can have two of these things as long as they're not both big.
And by big, like greater than 500 feet.
Yeah, as long as they're not both ADUs. You can have two, but they can't both be ADUs.
And they can't both be JADUs either.
Oh, okay. But I mean,
That's
his
weird.
technicality gets you around that, basically.
Right. So again, same deal here. That second example, it's a single family home and you have 2 detached ADUs, not possible, right? You only get 1 ADU. Same deal.
Because of the lot dividing law, you can just go ahead and split the lot, and you're back in compliance with that model.
Correct. And that's SB 9,
I think
which
it's
is
SB9.
which is not the ADU law, but yeah, you can mix and match.
It's a lot of interactions between.
Yeah.
Now you got 4.
But you have to have a minimum lot size before you can 60/40 it.
Yeah.
But let's use the bonus law.
Yeah, apologies too. This I'll need to fix. This third line is possible. You can have a single family home with a JADU and a detached ADU. Again,
Yeah.
2 different ones, okay. Same 2, not possible.
No, I think the other one is saying you can't build an ADU and then attach a junior ADU to that ADU.
No, yeah, what I messed up is this should be a check
Yeah.
and this should be an X. You can't have you can't have a JADU attached to an ADU.
Oh.
I'll make a note here for next time. The JADU must be attached to the single family home.
To the existing one.
Okay. Did you know that multifamily homes, multifamily dwellings can also have ADUs? So I just have 2 up there, but you can have ADUs inside like a condo complex. A condo complex can also have up to maximum 2 detached ADUs on the lot. You can't have more than 2 detached.
So,
And what's the max size for an ADU again?
Under our code, is it 1,200?
1,200?
1,200, just like.
so one house was excluded from the study that we did for the earlier hearing because it's a multifamily dwelling. So because it's a multifamily dwelling, they're entitled to have 2 ADUs on their lot. 2 detached ADUs, according to this.
Well, any house, it's
What
just
was
saying
the-
multifamily dwellings are the exception.
The Lima property we just
Yes,
discussed?
there was one house that was excluded from the study, 319
Oh.
Ramona.
I don't know.
Oh, that was multifamily.
So because it's multifamily, they could have 2 ADUs on that property.
Correct.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the changes. AB 1332, so I mean all ADU law, it has like an application process and their procedures. Generally speaking, the reason you folks don't weigh in is because they're processed ministerially without discretionary review and there's no hearing permitted for them. Sometimes when the applicant decides to pair their ADU with some other request that this body can hear, like an addition or like a single family home, then they both come before the body together, but the Planning Commission nevertheless does not weigh in on the ADU portion. When we get these applications, we need to approve or deny the application within 60 days of a completed application. A completed application. Often these applications aren't complete, so we go back and forth a little bit. Once it's complete, we have 60 days to make our determination. Again, you can delay if they decided to attach their application to some other project, or they requested a delay. Now here's a new thing, and I'm going to talk about this more in a later slide. This timeline is reduced to 30 days if the local agency has pre-approved plans or approved an identical ADU. Don't think about it too much. I'm gonna talk about it in a future slide. This is actually more for staff. So different development standards for ADUs and JADUs, as you can see, JADUs are always attached and within the residence. They have the same minimum, but their maximums are different. Their cooking facilities are slightly different. Multifamily can never have a JADU. It's always a single family home. Separate entrances, you're right, Chair, and sanitation can be slightly different.
Does density bonus apply to ADUs?
No.
Not yet.
My low-income JDU.
That'll be next year's update.
Oh, well, no, I take that back. Let's think about that. If it's a multifamily development and 2 of the units in the back detached are ADUs, then yeah, that's part of the base density. It would apply. I've never seen a project like that, but I guess it
My
could.
5-unit place is getting big.
It is.
Yeah,
It is.
it could apply. Okay, so owner occupancy requirements. Let me share a brief history here. So in 2016, the legislator added an owner occupancy requirement to the ADU law to avoid speculative development on ADUs by large corporations. In 2019, the legislator removed the ability of local governments to require the primary unit to be owner occupied until January 1st, 2015. So they said, 2025. They said once January 2025 comes along, cities will be able to require owner occupancy. AB 976 says, no, we changed our mind again. Owner occupancy can't be a requirement for an ADU forever. So cities will no longer have that authority. And the reasoning the legislator is providing for this move is because they're basically prioritizing the financing of ADUs over fears of corporate speculation. They're saying we're in desperate need for housing. We need to, whether corporations are financing it or mom and pop shops, or, single family homes or whoever, we just want them to be built. So that's something we were considering at one time in the city was reintroducing this owner occupancy requirement, and that's no longer an option. Okay, so the separate conveyance of ADUs. Existing law prohibits the separate sale or conveyance of an ADU or JDU unless developed by nonprofit affordable housing developers. So there's like this whole section of the ADU law. It's like a whole different section that provides this really complex procedure for nonprofit developers who come in, build ADUs, sell it off to low-income people, put all these restrictions on the use of it. It's like practically never used. I've never seen it used before in any of our cities. Now, AB 1033 authorizes, it doesn't require, it authorizes the city of Sierra Madre, if it wants, to adopt an ordinance to allow the separate sale or conveyance of an ADU and primary dwelling unit as a condo. So if you remember SB 9, if I'm remembering this correctly, SB 9 did not operate like a condo. SB 9 said, we'll split this lot, you get this house, I get this house. This law is saying you can build an ADU, so you have a big house and you have a tiny house, but they're going to operate like a condo if you decide to convey them separately. No lot split required, if I'm not mistaken. But you must obtain lien holder, lender, or if you live in an HOA, HOA consent before you do it. And if you go this route, the utility company, once you notify them that you're going to do this, can require installation of separate utility connections. Right now, if you build an ADU, you don't need a separate utility connection. The same sewage line that goes, the lateral that goes to the main home can connect to the ADU. If you sell these off separately, you're going to need 2 separate meters.
We charge a huge fee to put a new sewer line.
That's gonna kill all of that,
That's like
Yeah.
20 grand.
Well, yeah, it's
The sewer
The ADU buyer.
will require it? I
it,
mean, it's not like it's metered.
it's going to be up to the city. The water department is going to make a
All
determination.
condominiums share sewer lines.
Our water and sewer are going to have to make that call, so it'll be up to Supervisor McGee. If we want to, if the city wants to go this route, this is totally optional.
Right, right.
What's the difference between a condominium and a regular multifamily dwelling?
There's the CC&Rs, so they're bound together through the CC&Rs, and the CC&Rs for this, I didn't include it because there's a long list of things, but some of those things include, do I have my notes? There's something called like an equity capture agreement. So if these are like deed restricted affordable and you decide to sell them to someone that is market rate, you don't get to capture that whole benefit of this is a subsidized unit that you basically got subsidized through all these state laws, and you want to sell it at market rate, it's captured through this like equity agreement. I forget what equity capture agreement. And there's other requirements that are placed that have to be included in the CCNRs per this new state law, which don't exist for SB 9 type developments when you split them.
Yeah, and another difference between them is SB 9 is a land subdivision, but for condominium is divided in area and space.
Thank you.
Yeah, 'cause, I mean, who owns the part of the yard, you know, you sell it off.
Yeah.
Well, you all
Which
you
is
all own
owned
it.
by
That's
all
why
the,
the CC
Yeah.
So if you have a
Yeah.
dog, it runs all over the yard, you know, your neighbor the guy who sold you the condo puts a fence up and says, hey, keep your dog out of my yard. He goes, it sounds like,
You have an undivided
my
interest.
high. This
Yeah.
is our yard.
It's an undivided interest in that, yeah, in the yard.
Undivided interest.
Okay, pre-approval program, also new, and probably my favorite part of this. I think it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. So the city, every city, needs to adopt a process for pre-approving ADU plans by January 1st, 2025. This does not mean the ADU is approved. We issue these ADU permits. We're saying there's a process for pre-approving plans. This is great for, let's say, like, hypothetically, let's say there's a architect on the commission. And let's say this hypothetical architect on the commission wanted to have pre-approved plans that he can reuse. This is the way to do it. You go into the city and you say, here's my ADU submittal, this is the design. City pre-approves it. That design can be used, can just be recycled. And the city will, and it's not site specific.
Right.
So,
And it applies the 30-day.
and it applies to 30 days. So
Yeah.
there's a quicker turnaround.
Yep.
It can be recycled. So the thought being here, it's expensive to draw up these plans, and we're going to reduce the cost of drawing up these plans by allowing architects, cities, to create form plans, and that can be passed out cheaply or for free if the city wants to put like a pre-approved plan on their website, and someone comes in and says, all right, I'm not going to pay an architect, I just want A, B, or C. All right, I like C, I'll take that. All they pay is the application fee at that point.
Former Commissioner Hutt was a big fan of that and
Yeah,
was
we had talked about it.
advocating for us to adopt plan. The idea being, we'll put forth designs that we like, because we have no control over the designs of these. They could look like a boxcar.
Right, right. And I think it's part of our housing element program
would be
goals,
boxcars.
right? If I'm not mistaken. Is it part of our housing element program? No.
Oh,
But
nice.
we actually partner up with
You on,
San Gabriel Valley COG.
Lima.
They are using a grant fund to obtain architects and designs. It's called the REAP grant
Oh, great.
1.0, and then there's a REAP grant 2.0 that they're going to acquire the pre-reviewed plan along with calculations, structural calculations. All the applicant need to do is to do a site planning. They still have to prepare the topography and do the site design, but the structure itself will be all pre-approved.
And these are going to be good for the period, for the building code period, which I think is like, a building code is good for 3 years. So it's good for that, it's good, they're going to be good for those 3 years. And then once the new building code is adopted, then we'll have to pre-approve a new set of plans for the next 3 years, because you can't get around the building code. You can get around planning code, but you can't get around building code.
Is that something that we could discuss at another meeting, is the idea of putting forth a recommendation to City Council to authorize some kind of an RFP through planning that has city-friendly designs, so that people can just come in and get those use those pre-approved plans that we've actually think fit in, rather than whatever it is that would just get recommended?
Yeah, we can agendize that once we have a confirmation from the SGV COG. They're still working on the plan and acquiring them, so we don't have it at this time. but this is the project, their ongoing project.
So I think what I was asking for is slightly different, is commissioning architect to actually draw plans that are Sierra Madre friendly. Because if we leave it, we have no purview at all over anything that has to do with an ADU. So if we want to get ahead of that, we could actually commission a couple sets of drawings that fit in to the city, what we like to see, and then those would be pre-approved. Somebody could literally just walk to the counter and, I want A, B, or C, to your point, and they would be on the pre-approved list. And that would be one way that we might have a little more control over what we see built in town.
And again, up to the city council, but the application fee for that could also be a lot less because it takes less staff time to review a pre-approved plan than it would to approve a non-pre-approved plan.
Which would also
Incentivize
building
them, yeah.
in a design that we
Right.
like.
Right, to your point. See, I knew you'd be interested in this bill. Unlike, okay, I mentioned that point, pre-approved plans and the applicant's contact information must be posted to the website. Again, they have developers in mind. I mean, they have developers and architects in mind. So they want the plan to be posted with the contact information so they can contact that person and say, hey, I want to use this plan. Can you help me build it? Etc. Okay. Okay, the last one, Housing Accountability Act. This is a complex bill, but something that comes up, a complex law, but it comes up a lot. So I thought it's important for the commission to cover this one. Commissioner, you and Vice Chair Pevsner, if you wouldn't mind, Commissioner, if you go first.
All right. Isn't it frustrating when the city denies a project that meets all the city's zoning requirements?
Yep, my opinion, cities shouldn't be able to deny a project that follows the rules written right here on the page.
Especially since cities are in the driver's seat when it comes to writing the rules anyway, to decide where the residential uses are allowed and all of the development standards like setbacks and building heights.
As long as the development standards are written with objectively, a person should be able to read and understand the requirements directly from the code, not wait for public hearings to learn if their roof pitch is compatible with the neighborhood.
Agreed. And the bar to deny compliant projects should probably be high.
Agreed. I think that to deny a project, to reduce the number of units in a project, the city should need to make strict findings of denial. These findings of denial should be laid out in state law.
Again, just to give you a sense of what the state's thinking when they implement the Housing Accountability Act. Okay, so the Housing Accountability Act definition of a housing development project, it only applies to housing development projects. We just saw that Lima project. That Lima project is not a housing development project. It does not qualify, and that's why we were able to exercise discretion to the extent we did. A housing development project is only residential units, plural, so it has to be 2 or more. In the prior example, it was just 1, so it didn't qualify. Neither do additions qualify for HAA. We're only talking about the development of 2 or more. So like, let's say someone has a single family home and wants to build an ADU, it doesn't qualify. That's just 1 unit that they're building, 1 new unit they're building. You have to contemplate, your application has to contemplate the development of at least 2 new units.
So if you're taking a house down and doing a new house in an ADU, it's still considered just an addition of 1?
How do we treat that?
Or is that 2?
We did have a case example of one being demolished for the construction of a new house, an ADU, that fell under Housing Accountability Act.
So we're treating that as 2 units.
So my same hypothetical 5 units over a commercial space downtown, as long as at least 2/3 of the square footage designated for residential use is true,
Yes, right.
then it would go to this too.
Right.
So we get more bonus.
Well, this is not a bonus thing. This is a limitation on your discretion thing.
Oh, yeah, okay.
We just
Well, I can
can't
make
say
it
it's
ugly.
not in character.
And we'll get to what
So
those
now I can make it
limitations
ugly.
are. We'll get to what that standard review is, And then it also applies to transitional housing and supportive housing, which we don't see
Okay.
very often. And those are approved as to right anyway. I won't talk about this point because I think it'll just confuse everyone. Housing development projects. Okay. All right, so here's the analysis we have to go through, what staff has to go through every time we're confronted with one of these projects. First, is it an affordable project? Meaning, do they have certain thresholds of affordability in this project? If they have 20% or more units affordable to low-income households, then there's a special standard review that applies. If it doesn't, then we go to the default standards. So the default standards are over here. No, that's not it. Sorry. So if the project, see, I already confused myself.
We're already lost.
Yeah. All right, let's do this again. Housing development project. Is it a housing development project? Does it meet the definition? It doesn't? Okay, it's not subject to the HA. Like today's project, didn't meet the definition, so it's not subject to it. If it does meet that definition, here we go. If it does meet that definition, is it 100% affordable to moderate income households? If it is 100% affordable to moderate income households, then there's a special. Yeah, and it's, yeah. So a special standard review applies. If it's 20% or more affordable to low or very low income households, then the special standard review applies. These are more stringent, really hard to deny a project in this realm. If it's a market rate unit though, or it doesn't meet these two standards, right, these two thresholds, then the default standard applies. The default standard, I don't want to give you the false impression like it's easy to satisfy. It's not. Here's what it says. The project, if the project is consistent with objective general plan, zoning, subdivision, design standards and criteria, so you look at your staff report, you see all the check boxes, and staff says yes, 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 it meets all these development standards, then the city cannot disapprove the project or impose conditions that reduce its density unless it makes both of the following findings. 1, there is a specific adverse impact upon the public health or safety, and there is no feasible method to satisfactorily mitigate or avoid the adverse impact. This is a difficult finding to make. This is something like, for example, I remember we were talking about this with Public Works one time, where it couldn't accommodate a sewer line. So it wouldn't accommodate the sewer lateral, and because the development doesn't accommodate the sewer lateral, it would be a specific adverse impact upon public health and safety, and there was no way around it, so it couldn't be satisfactorily mitigated. Unless they put in a septic tank, which they didn't want to do, so project died. CEQA still applies. You said of course, but a new bill came. I was struggling with this one as well. This was very complex.
Can I quickly read the CEQA? I think
Oh,
it's
sure.
just to read that one.
It just says CEQA applies.
Okay, got it.
I put in a long quote there, but that's what it
Yeah.
says. Now, AB 1633 says, it defines what a disapproval of a housing development project is. It expands on the definition. Because earlier I said you can't disapprove a housing project or reduce its density unless you make findings. So what does disapproving a project mean? It means voting to disapprove it, right? The application, or voting to disapprove a land use approval or entitlement necessary for issuance of a building project. So for example, let's say that there's a design review permit and like a tentative map. And you say, oh, okay, well, yes to the design review permit, but no to the tentative map. That's a no across the board because those two go hand in hand. Without the tentative map, there is no processing the design review permit. If we fail to comply with the specified time periods for approving or disapproving a development project, there are time periods, there's deadlines, and we'll get to the deadlines on some other day. That's considered a disapproval de facto or de jure. Fail to meet timelines for issuance of post-entitlement permits. So after the entitlements have been issued, and we have to issue like building permits, the post-entitlement permits, if we don't meet the deadlines for issuing building permits, that's a violation of the Housing Accountability Act. And now, this is where cities are playing games. Cities knew that CEQA still applied. So what they did is, they told the applicant, okay, we'll give you your permit, but first you have to do the CEQA analysis. So they did the CEQA analysis. Then they said, okay, well, we think that this is a significant effect. So now you have to do these mitigation measures, and the mitigation measures would be like really onerous. Or the analysis itself, sometimes they make the person do a full EIR for a relatively small project, which is very expensive. So they'd effectively kill a project without actually having to vote to kill the project. So the state got smart, and now they're saying, if the city fails to make a determination of whether the project is exempt from CEQA, or commits an abuse of discretion in like requiring an EIR or something like that, then that's considered a disapproval. Or if the city fails to adopt a negative declaration or addendum for the project to certify the EIR or approve another comparable environmental document, that could also be considered a disapproval of the housing project. So basically they're saying, whereas before we granted you guys a lot of discretion on whether to require environmental review and all these things, now they're saying, we're going to limit that discretion a little bit. And they set out a bunch of factors, which I'm not going to go into, but it's in the law. So they're kind of cutting down on some of the games that were being played with CEQA. So there's a definition for what objective standards are, because again, if a housing development meets the objective standards, only then is our discretion limited. It means involving no personal or subjective judgment by a public official and being uniformly verifiable by reference to an external and uniform benchmark or criterion available and knowable by both the development applicant or proponent and the public official. I couldn't do it in one breath, I tried. So just to give you an example, if you said that the project, the development can't be more than 33 feet measured from the ground up, it's written in the code. There is no personal or subjective judgment to what 3 feet means. It's uniformly verifiable because it's written in the code. And it's knowable by both the development applicant and the proponent. So that would pass. If we said it has to be compatible with the community standard, that is open to personal or subjective judgment, and that would not, so we couldn't use that criterion. So staff struggles with this a lot, because oftentimes the way our design review permits are drafted, there's subjective findings there. And it's difficult because we're presenting potentially a project to you, and you have to make a number of findings, but you can't make any of those findings under the HAA because they're all subjective. So we just have to basically, they exist in the code, we just have to skip over them until we find an objective one that we can have you commissioners look at. So numeric standards are objective. I don't mean to say that only numeric standards, like you can say red, but if you're gonna say red, have that color or that red number that Home Depot has as a reference. Okay, let's skip through this. This one's kind of important, just to give you a sense. The standards of review apply to all discretionary land use entitlements of housing projects. So subdivision map approvals, conditional use permits, design review permits, hillside development permits, discretionary demolition permits. These are all permits we have in the city. Commissioner Moran, pop quiz. It doesn't apply to variances, but why doesn't it apply to variances? That's also a discretionary approval we issue in the city.
I'm not sure.
So the reason it doesn't apply to variances is because by definition, a variance means that you are not complying with the objective standards in our code, and you're requesting a variance to get around our objective standards. That's why variances, you have full discretion. But the rest of them, they're limited under the HAA for housing development projects.
And just one thing, the Meadows,
Yes.
not an HAA.
The Meadows now is an HAA project because before, the land use designation was inconsistent with what they were trying to build. And that's why, at that time, if you remember, we were making the point of saying, exercise your discretion now, because once it passes that threshold, once we change the general plan and zoning to residential, then for the tentative tract map, subdivision map, it's all gonna be HAA, and it's all gonna basically follow the development agreement that we set out for them.
But the development agreement gives us more latitude than the HAA would, correct?
The development agreement is a contract, and they can't get around that, so they have to abide by the development agreement.
What about, so one of the things that we were worried about is that there's a maximum number of meetings that are allowed.
Mm-hmm. And it is subject to that now. This tentative tract map approval that's gonna come before the planning commission is gonna be subject to 5 meetings. We're subject to that, and that's 5 meetings for the city council and planning commission, both bodies. Assuming there's an appeal. Actually, it will go to the city council, I forget, there's no need for an appeal, it's gonna go to the city council, because it's a recommendation to.
Recommendation from the planning commission to
Right.
city council.
Right.
Okay, but I thought that there was, part of the reason that we were happy that we got to keep the development agreement was because it gave us more control at least one of the stages. Was it the?
We're getting, our code doesn't allow for meetings for the park, and we're getting meetings, I think we agreed to 3 meetings for design of the park. That's the only thing I'm aware of in terms of increasing the number of meetings.
So does the 5 meeting, when we start looking at the actual floor plans of the houses, because those were all just representations.
Right.
Are those
5 meetings.
5 meetings total?
And by the way, that's gonna be 5 meetings for because they didn't pair both of them, they didn't pair the design review permit and the tentative tract map together. That means 5 meetings for the tentative tract map, and when the design review permit comes along, 5 meetings for the design review permit. Make sense? Right. We won't get into the timelines, let me skip that. Okay, we're at the end here. The Housing Accountability Act is a powerful tool, primarily because it expands the legal remedies available to enforce these housing laws. Before, if an applicant wasn't happy with the commission's determination, it's the applicant that would sue. Sometimes, if the city's code allows, the neighbors would sue. The Housing Accountability Act says not only can the applicant sue and the neighbors sue, any person who would be eligible to apply for residency in the project, a low-income person in Sacramento, if let's say low income is introduced in Sierra Madre, like a project, a low-income person in Sacramento can say, well, I was considering applying for that, to live in that unit. That person can sue. A housing organization, there's a lot of nonprofits that have come about after this law was created that sue cities all over the state over a lot of these housing laws. They do that under this provision here. These nonprofit housing organizations that advocate for creation of more development, they have a right to sue now. If the city loses, city pays attorney's fees. There's a higher legal burden that the city has to satisfy in order to have the city's decision upheld. A court has more authority now. The court can issue minimum fines of $10,000 per housing unit. If there's inaction or bad faith, the minimum fine award is multiplied by 5, so $50,000 per unit potentially if the court finds bad faith on the part of the city. HCD can also refer the matter to the Attorney General. Now, this part was kind of unheard of because before 2019, there was never really a situation where the Attorney General, like the state, was getting involved in local city projects. The first time I remember this happening was when the state went after, I think it was Huntington Beach, for flaunting the housing element laws. Now there's this new bill, AB 1485, the last one we'll talk about today. Intervention by the Attorney General. It's just this one line, it's this one sentence, and it basically says that the Attorney General now has the right to intervene by right. So no more judge weighing or not this party should intervene. Attorney General applies, they intervene by right in any lawsuit in the state, whether they initiate it or not, related to enforcing housing laws. This is a big deal, and it just happened. And in closing, I just want to tell the story of our neighbor, city of La Cañada. I don't know if you've read about this in the news, but La Cañada had an affordable development that was proposed. I think it was at their like Christian Science Center on Foothill. And the developer wanted to, it was like a medium-sized development. I think it was less than 50 units. I believe they were taking advantage of the density bonus law because they had a certain number of low-income affordable, 20% low-income affordable, if I'm not mistaken. And so they were going to exceed certain development standards. And they submitted their application to the city, and the city found their application to be incomplete because it didn't comply with certain requirements that the city had. The developer appealed that incomplete determination for their application. It went to the city council. City council said, nope, we sustain that incomplete determination decision. Your application is incomplete. So developer sued the city of La Cañada. And then a nonprofit that was interested in this lawsuit sued the city of La Cañada. And then HCD decided to intervene and sue the city of La Cañada. And then the Attorney General decided to get involved. So La Cañada is in a very difficult situation right now because they have not only the developer's attorney, but they have the nonprofit attorneys and the state of California trying to enforce this housing law that the state is saying has been violated. So this is a pretty big hammer, and at least in one case, in La Cañada's case, the state decided to exercise it. And that's it for this time around. I'll be back with more bills the next time around.
I read a couple books over Christmas about this, but I read about one case in San Francisco where the city had negotiated like a housing development to be lower number of units than the developer originally wanted. And they finally got to an agreement. And then they were going to go forth and build it like kind of like our meadows or whatever. It was like this long process. And a nonprofit came in, or an individual actually came in and sued to stop the development because they wanted more. And neither the developer nor the city wanted this. It was someone external who came in and said, like, actually this development isn't good enough. We want more units.
Well, luckily that individual can't control that lawsuit because really it's what the developer wants to do. It's not what.
Well, they ended up losing.
Yeah.
But it did delay
Held
things
it
for a
up.
while. But it was
Sure.
kind of a wild thing to have, like there's the community wanting lower units, there's developer wanting more units, and then finally there's some sort of agreement, and then there's someone else who comes in and says, no, that agreement needs to be even bigger, kind of thing.
How do they lose as an individual? They just don't have standing or something? Or?
No, they have
No,
standing.
they have
They
standing
can
under this law. They
yeah,
could.
they can come into the lawsuit, but
What's their,
they can't determine what gets built. That's the developer's choice and the city's choice. Because
but they're suing to say you have to build more units, so they're telling the developer, you better build more units. In the city, you better let them do it.
yeah, like they could have, right, they could have, if there was a housing law being violated, they could sue to enforce that housing law. But in the example provided, there was no housing law being violated. The developer is happy with the development. The city seemed like it was happy with the development.
Oh.
So
Yeah.
they're
So
good to
it
go.
ended up being a loss, but it was just an example of they had the right to sue,
Yeah, but
so it did.
did they really think they were gonna, I mean, sounds like a nuisance lawsuit. Can you recover, and so there's no law to punish them for doing such.
So how does this affect the city? I mean, there seems like a lot of the onus is now on the city, and, I mean, is it gonna be, we're gonna have to hire a bunch of people so they can keep track of all this stuff now, or?
Nope, it's just us.
So what-
We are it's part of our job, it's part of my job, is to monitor these new laws and then to work with staff to amend the code to make sure that we're compliant. And when there are opportunities available to, like the ADU pre-approvals, we're gonna have to create a process. Regardless, we have to create a process by 2025. This body will likely see what that process is before 2025, sometime this year. So when there are opportunities like that created, we're going to perform our role, and this body will have an opportunity to chime in and
But in
make
the
it Sierra Madre
future,
specific.
If we have a lot of low or moderate income, it's still on the city and the landlord to verify the income and all of that, and we could get fined for those things, right? I mean, so the city is responsible for making sure that those units are where they're supposed to be and all of it.
Yeah, and I mean, we have them report to us, and they sign saying this is the truth. So I think the city's okay given its procedure. In the Encinitas case, it seemed like the city shouldn't have done. The city seemed like it knew better and shouldn't have done what it did.
But the other aspect of that is also, we don't have any
we don't have a
of these
ton.
units today, right?
We
No,
don't
we
have-
do have
Or I'm sorry, we have, what,
Low-income units.
3 or 4 on
Highland?
Highland?
We have the Highland Muse 3-unit for sale that was already sold, and then there is one new one on 30 Suffolk.
But we
For
don't have a-
rent.
So the scale of what we have to monitor today is still manageable.
Right, and we don't have,
That was.
we don't have a ton of opportunities like that. I remember John Hutt brought that up, that it's not like we have huge parcels of land. We're gonna have somebody who's gonna wanna build 30 units, and then all of a sudden they're gonna wanna
From
build
the sound
60.
of it, you don't need a huge parcel of land anymore.
Well, yeah,
Well,
and
the ADU stuff, I agree.
No, I mean,
but-
on
A com-
multi-residential.
there's actually it's in the works, but a conversation that we'll need to have with the city council at some point is the city has identified sites for the development of affordable housing. 20 units, density of 20 units per acre, sometimes 30 units, right, in some locations.
42 for religious housing overlay.
42 for religious housing overlay, some are 30 units per acre. And in those areas, HCD has a list up on its website throughout the state of California with those types of they call them Mullen densities. Developers are looking. At some point, I suspect within this 8 years, one of those sites, you're gonna see a development come in there. So one of the conversations to have in this with the city council is, okay, are we prepared? When that development comes, we're not gonna have a lot of discretion over what that looks like. And the way you build that discretion in is you do the work now to develop standards to reflect kind of what you want. So when the developer comes in, he's building
Is there
as much as
also
he
a
can.
possibility, assuming that will happen or may be required to happen, for the city to actually be the developer? Like,
Well, so not now, but that constitutional provision I talked about that prevents local governments and state governments from building is going to be up on the ballot for referendum. First time in I don't know how many years they're going to try to overturn it.
because if that changes and you assume that all these laws are gonna have any Joe random developer come in and have the city have zero control, the only way the city could have control is do the building themselves.
No, I don't. I think the more common way it's done is you can wait for a developer to come to you, or you can have a plan in place and seek out the developer
what
to
I
build
meant.
what you want.
Yeah.
But the city wouldn't be
It's a
building.
partnership, yeah.
Yeah, it's a partnership.
But the city
like,
wouldn't be building.
The city kind of initiates the
Right.
process versus waiting for Joe Random to come in.
Right.
But yeah, so I could see something like that being advantageous if we see that in the future happening. But of course, the optics of that for the public who don't read through all this law is nuts, because they're like, well, the city's trying to get this big development. When in fact, it's like we're trying to avoid this big development being,
Right.
this awful thing.
So Alex, could they have made it more complicated with all these?
Oh, there's more coming. Just wait.
Yeah,
There's
I think the trend is that a lot of the control is being taken away from the cities,
Right.
and it's just build,
I-
build, build.
I didn't even go over the most complicated ones. So,
So basically, all the money that they would save on cutting through the red tape, they're just spending it and giving it to their lawyers so they can.
no, you know,
decipher all
what's,
this.
I think what's happening in this, I'm gonna defend the state for a second. I think what they're trying to do is, they're saying, when they adopt these really, really complex laws, putting aside the Housing Accountability Act, density bonus, they're basically saying, you know, city development standards, forget it. We're gonna, when people build affordable, we're gonna have them override all your development standards.
Yeah.
But they have like really complex laws, like SB 9 is a complex law, ADU law is complex. The state's basically saying, if you build exactly what we want built, because we think there's a need for this specific type of housing, then we're gonna waive all these development standards. So they make it super complex because the state, and the legislator
There's
has
already
something in mind.
existing laws, and so you have to kind of weave through that to get to.
Yeah, and the legislator has something in mind, very concrete thing in mind that it wants built, so it's making sure that those things are built.
They're cutting off municipalities anywhere they
Yeah.
can.
So when you speak towards the, I don't want to say future-proofing, but adopting codes now so that we will be able to rely on them later, are you talking about a more verbose set of objective codes, or what was, can you speak to what you were talking about?
Yeah, no, it's a couple of things. Let me flag something now for our consideration. I've talked about it with staff, and because I'm sure there aren't a lot of developers watching, so it's not going to be that big an issue. But for example, in the housing element, we've identified sites for affordable development, and we've zoned for that affordability. Now we're all assuming we have a certain, and you know, because of our regional housing needs allocation, it says we have to build X number of, we have to zone for X number of very low income, X number of low income. We did that. Now, I think when we did that, the city's intention was that when those sites are developed, they're developed with very low income housing. Not moderate, because if they develop all moderate, or if they develop all market rate at those sites, what happens is that site's no longer an affordable site. So we have to identify another site in the city.
Right.
So the idea is to have affordable development at those sites that we've designated for affordable development. What the housing element in our zoning code doesn't include is an inclusionary housing requirement to mandate that those sites are developed with affordable units. There's nothing stopping a developer now coming in and saying, that site, I want to develop with full market rate. And if it burdens the city and now you have to go somewhere else and start designating other spots along Sierra Madre Boulevard for affordable development, that's the city's problem. And so to have, you know, maybe an inclusionary housing ordinance, to have very specific design standards, and then maybe to go out and seek that partnership.
So this you're talking about the requirement, I don't know if it was in here, but that the city have a set number of units be built, or?
This
It's
is
the RENA, it's
policy
the,
thing.
yeah, but I think what you were talking about was the RENA designated sites.
Right, and you know, certain laws no longer apply once you meet your RENA. So the city is incentivized to meet its RENA. Like there's, maybe you heard of SB 35. SB 35 no longer applies if you've met your RENA. Some of the Housing Accountability Act limitations no longer apply if you've met your RENA. So,
When you say met your RENA, you mean actually built or identified locations? Because
building permits issued for those different affordability levels. That's what I mean.
Oh.
And we issue the building permits, but we don't do the building.
But you're saying that even though we made, like our last 9-year RENA numbers that we've met already, you're still saying that a developer could come in and build just build a full market value development there, and then we would be forced to find another place, something to fill that in. So
Correct.
Getting them off would be changing a lot. I say, once those are set, nobody can come in and do that anymore. That's what you're talking about,
No.
anticipating.
I'm not sure if we're saying the same thing, but what I'm saying is,
You want the city to change it so that our RENA numbers that we've established, that some developer can't just go, no, I'm gonna build a full market value house here.
yeah, for that site, you have to build, you know, certain number affordable.
Right.
because that's,
That would be a change to the zoning, you're saying?
that would be a change to the zoning,
Yeah.
right? Something to consider.
It doesn't devalue the property?
No? I mean, whether it devalues it or not, it's not a,
Doesn't
it's not a
matter.
take, it's not a regulatory taking if that's your concern, it's not illegal.
I mean, it sounds like before long, we'll lose all subjective oversight. I mean, we're one law away from them, from the state saying that the same objectivity applies to single family.
Yeah, and sure, I don't know what's gonna happen in the future, but all I'm saying is I think the value of this presentation is so that the commission is aware and we can have that discussion, and to the extent we can get ahead of it, to get ahead of it.
Yeah, and just for clarity, are you saying that we have to replace arena designated site off cycle or in the next cycle?
Within the same cycle, if you approve it, within 180 days, you have to find a new spot.
Yeah.
If you approve the project.
Okay.
Yeah,
But because it's a multifamily, we wouldn't be able to stop it.
right. And I mean, not only is it a multifamily, it's a housing element designated site, so there's more protections for that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That was quite a presentation. And would you say that was 50% of what we have, or 30% of what we have coming?
Yeah, the 33.
Okay.
No density bonuses for you, all right? Just keep it at that.
Yeah,
All right.
If we switch the order, we could do it prior to a contentious hearing, and everyone would be just grateful that we're able to have a discussion afterwards.
Right.
I like the way you think.
Yeah, first.
People leave,
that would be
and it'll be
strategic.
much easier.
All right, thank you very much. Planning Commission reports. No Planning Commission reports, so we'll turn it over to Planning and Community Preservation Department reports.
So Chair, the upcoming meeting on February 1st, the Planning Commission will be reviewing the tentative track map application for the Meadows. It will be the visiting tentative track map itself, subdividing the lot and all the utilities and the building path.
All right, and to the earlier question about how many meetings we can have, that's a total of 5. And so are we expected to complete that in 2 so that then City Council has 2? And if there's a vote or a appeal, that the City Council would have one last bite at that 5 meetings?
Difficult to say. I think the Planning Commission, that may be worth talking to the City Council liaison about what the City Council would want. It's a strategic decision.
Yes, a strategic decision would also be to talk about changing the times of those meetings so that we get enough time to go through this. I don't think I've been a part of a tentative tract map at this scale, and I have concern that something of that size and shape may require a lot more time, because I don't think that there's anything that says how like we can meet. Yeah, I don't know what the regulations are about how long we're allowed to meet.
There are no regulations regarding how long you can meet. If you wanted to meet earlier, the way to do it is to schedule a special meeting ahead of your regular meeting. So let's say if the Planning Commission wanted to meet at 5, for example, you would schedule a special meeting for 5 p.m. and then at 7 p.m. you would commence your regular meeting. If you wanted to change the timing.
But does that count as 2 meetings then?
I think it would.
I think it would. It
Yeah,
sounds
I
like it
guess in that way, good
But
point.
the first special one could be
You could just continue the
longer.
special meeting,
Yeah.
yeah, and cancel your regular meeting.
Well, right. We would just schedule it as a special meeting instead of a regular meeting.
Yeah.
And then start it at whatever time,
Right.
so that we had enough time. It's just a question of if we want to stay up late or if we want to skip dinner. Those would be our choices as we look at those those lengthy meetings, but,
City Attorney, I have a question then. Since this is just coming up now and I didn't know this was coming up next week, is it okay to discuss these things with the commission as the liaison, so I could check with city council and obviously with staff on how we go about this or what we think we need?
Staff can schedule the special meeting if that's the recommendation. of
so,
the-
sorry, two separate items. I
Yes.
think what the city council liaison is asking is,
How should we
how can she
organize?
talk to the city council about this at their meeting on Tuesday, which is the last meeting they have before we have our meeting?
And I can't violate any Brown Act, so I would need to only speak with one other council member, and same thing with, if I spoke out of this meeting with,
But I think if it's not an agendized item, they can't give us guidance on it. Is that correct?
Correct. So
what if it's on your agendized item?
I think the best way to go about it is probably to talk to the city manager, and then
Okay.
the city manager can
Contact us?
contact individual
Got it.
council members to get their individual sense of the issue,
Thank
but
you.
to avoid communication between council members.
Is there any violations with me communicating with any one of the commissioners?
No.
Okay. Just I can't communicate with 3 or more at a time.
You can communicate with all of them. You just
You can't share that
You cannot
information.
right. You can't share what you learned from the others.
Got it. Got
Can't
it.
play telephone.
No group
Yeah.
texts.
No.
But we also can't meet outside of a meeting. Like if I could, I can.
You can meet with any of them.
Yeah, one-on-one
is-
or
yeah.
1-on-2.
But, Manager Lynn, will you raise this to the city manager so that he's aware of it and that we're gonna need some
Guidance.
guidance? This is the first meeting we've had back, so this is the first that we thought about this. But because of the 5-meeting constraints that we're gonna have on this, we should plan accordingly. And if that means a special meeting that starts earlier,
Did we do the public hearing notice already? We did. 7 PM, unless we
Well, that's
continue
a-
the meeting, do we have time to issue a new public hearing notice?
We need to issue by today, so it was out this morning.
Oh, it was? Because we have a public hearing notice for this, and I believe the notice says 7.
7.
right, but they wouldn't have to renotice if we continue it. Oh, but if we
That
continue it to a
counts.
different meeting, does that
That's a
count as
separate
one?
meeting.
Yes. Continue to a separate meeting counts as 2.
Mhm.
Okay, then never mind, you don't need to talk to the city manager, we're gonna go late. So I would plan on coming with a full stomach and some caffeine and be ready for a long one at our next meeting, because that's the options that were left. And I would still recommend talking to the city manager so that the future meetings we can figure out, because we still need to understand how many meetings city council is gonna want.
Also, we've been discussing, as I mentioned before, we discussed planning commission. We discussed the importance of having all of your commissioners there for these, because there's only 5. That's one of the reasons we were talking about expanding, is because we need the, what's the word I was looking for?
Breadth of
The,
expertise.
Yeah, and just a array of different opinions discussing. So with this importance coming up, I really would request that we have a full commission for these upcoming meetings.
My request for a very long meeting would be that we have a break somewhere in there.
We're-
that
we're
is
perfectly within-
15 to 30 minutes, yeah.
Understood. Yeah, we just have to, there's a minimum break we can take,
Yeah.
and so we'll make sure that it's long enough to accommodate any of those needs.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome.
Bring a big old jug of coffee.
But we'll start at 7.
Yes, we have to start at 7 because it's already been noticed. And we can't continue it.
It'd be hard for me to get here at 5 anyway.
Yeah. All right, well, that's exciting. Is there anything else calendared for that particular meeting?
That would be the only item.
Okay, if we can keep it that way, that would be important.
Will do.
All right, anything else?
No, that concludes my report. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, then I will adjourn this meeting to our next meeting at February 1st. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.